Knoll, North County, Dublin in Ireland. A quiet and rural area with a low crime rate and a small community of just 400 people. It's beautiful and serene with stunning views and a wonderful sense of community. Monday, the 4th of October, 2004. At around 5:30 a.m., Joe O'Reilly left the family home Lambayview to go to work at Viacom Outdoor Advertising on the Bluebell Industrial Estate, where he worked as an account manager. He left his wife of 13 years, Rachel, at home with their sons, who were 2 and 4 years old. Later that morning, Joe sent Rachel a message saying, "You and the boys sleep okay? Wish Jackie a happy birthday for me. Please, kiss, kiss, kiss." He got no reply. He then left her voicemails between 11:52 a.m. and 1:45 p.m. At 1:15 p.m., Joe had received a call from their son's daycare, saying that Rachel had failed to pick him up at 12:30, like she always did. He called Rachel's phone and left her a message, asking if someone else had been due to pick their son up. He called again at 1:24, saying he was worried about her and she needed to call him back. But there was still no response from Rachel. Joe set off to get his sons and called his mother-in-law, Rose Callelli. He told her he hadn't heard from his wife all morning and his calls to the home phone and her mobile had gone unanswered. He asked if she could go to the family home to check on Rachel and make sure everything was okay whilst he traveled to collect the children. Joe called Rachel's phone again, saying he was driving down the motorway and had spoken to Rose, who also hadn't heard from her, and he begged her to call him back. Joe phoned Rachel's youngest brother, Anthony, to tell him that he hadn't heard from her and that she hadn't gone to the creche when she was supposed to get their son. Family members tried calling the home phone and her mobile too, but all the calls rang out. Rose had a feeling that something was seriously wrong. This was not like Rachel, so she set off to check on her daughter. When she pulled up at the bungalow, she immediately had a sense of relief as Rachel's car was in the driveway. The patio door was open. The house was silent. Some of the kitchen drawers were open and items were scattered across the floor. In the living room, the videos were all dumped in a pile. It looked as though the house had been ransacked. She then went to Rachel and Joe's bedroom. Rose found her daughter's lifeless body. She was lying on her back in a pool of blood, with the upper half of her body twisted. There was so much congealed blood that Rose said she was unable to determine if her daughter's face was on its side or if she was face down. Blood covered the walls, the ceiling, and there was even blood spatter in the bathroom. When she touched her, she said Rachel was as cold as marble. A neighbor said she heard Rose screaming. Rose ran to her bag to get her phone and call the police. She then called one of her sons, Declan, to tell him the horrifying news. Declan said he was going to come to the house, and so was Jim, Rose's husband. Joe got to the house at 2:30 with the children, and Rose told him she had found Rachel's body. He ran into the house shouting her name. When he came to her body, he said, "Jesus, Rachel, what did you do?" Rachel's best friend Jackie was a nurse and she went to the house. She too checked Rachel and confirmed there was no pulse and she wasn't breathing. Rachel's father Jim soon arrived, but was told by a police officer not to go inside, as the scene was too horrific. When the first police officer got to the scene, Joe went up to them in the garden and said he had been in the house and touched Rachel's body to check for a pulse, and said that he had moved a box near to where her body lay into the boys' room. He said he hoped he hadn't destroyed any evidence. When Joe was spoken to by the police, he had an alibi. He said he had been at a bus depot in Broadstone, and it seemed unlikely that he would have been able to travel all that way to the house and back in the time frame given. So who would have wanted Rachel dead and why? Rachel Callelli had been adopted as a baby, as had her 4 other siblings, by their parents Jim and Rose. The family was incredibly close. Rachel always made time to catch up with her parents and siblings, her 3 brothers Anthony, Declan, and Paul, and her sister Anne. Rachel was athletic and played softball, even holding a softball world record. She was described as a live wire and someone with a really good heart. Rose referred to her as a brilliant ray of sunshine who was well behaved as a child but also adventurous, throwing herself into everything she could. Her father Jim said that she was someone who would give anything a go and loved being independent, with a knack for DIY and decorating. When she was 17, she met Joe O'Reilly, who was 2 years older than her, while they worked at the same department store. He said the first thing he noticed about her was her height. Rachel stood at 5'11" and Joe was 6'5". He had asked her to go on a date with him several times and she turned him down. But Joe continued to ask. Joe overheard that she played softball and one day turned up at her practice session and joined her team. They were both successful and even had the potential to turn pro. Their relationship then became a romantic one. At the top of the Eiffel Tower, Joe asked Rachel to marry him, and a couple of years later the pair were wed. They then welcomed 2 sons. They moved to their new house, a bungalow called Lambay View, in Knoll in 2003. It was the perfect place to raise their children. Rachel loved being a mother, and everything she did was for her 2 boys. Joe O'Reilly had also come from a close family, with him being the second eldest of 2 boys and 2 girls. But his circumstances were different. When he was young, the marriage between his parents had fallen apart, and his father had left the country and moved to England. Joe was described as an incredibly confident man, and he was determined to get ahead in the advertising industry, despite not having the qualifications. He was so persuasive and confident with clients that his lack of credentials didn't appear to matter. He would get into work early and leave late, determined to make his goals come to fruition. When they moved into their 3-bedroom bungalow, Rose did have some concerns. She was worried that Rachel would be lonely living there as Joe was away from home so much with work. But Rachel seemed to be delighted with the move. She became well known in the area as she sold Avon and Tupperware, and within a few weeks of moving in, she held a barbecue so she could meet and get to know her new neighbors. In spite of wanting to appear to be a family man, some of Rachel's friends said Joe was more of an absent father and Rachel was left to do a significant amount of the parenting on her own. He would always leave the house early in order to go to the gym and often wouldn't be back until well into the evening. Rachel was more of a private person who didn't talk about her marital problems, but some could sense there might be issues between the 2 of them. The now retired Detective Inspector Pat Mary was then a detective sergeant at Balbriggan Garda Station. When he arrived on scene, as he was a qualified scene of crime examiner with plenty of experience under his belt, he went in to see exactly what they were dealing with. In all his years in the police, he was shocked by just how brutal this killing had been. It's a sight I will never forget. My God, she was pulverized. Her hair was matted in blood. You could see down to her skull. You could see there was severe force used to inflict that, so the poor woman had no chance whatsoever, absolutely none. It was savage, cold, just unbelievable. Her father Jim said that Rachel would have fought for her life with everything she had, and he believed that the killer had attacked her from behind. Although it initially appeared to be a robbery gone wrong, one thing immediately stood out. There was money in the home that hadn't been taken. 800 euros in a box in the kitchen and 400 in Rachel's bag. Based on what he found, Pat didn't believe that this was a random attack carried out by a stranger. It's highly unusual to see someone in the state I saw Rachel O'Reilly having administered such a beating. The viciousness of the assault was a pure display of hate for this woman. If you hate someone that much, you're going to know them. Pat Mary believed the robbery had been staged. They set up an incident room back at the station, and more than 40 officers were sent out to conduct door-to-door inquiries and search the local area to try and uncover any potential clues. Gardaí carrying out a preliminary investigation outside the house where the remains of a mother of 2 were found this afternoon. News soon began to spread that a brutal murder had been committed. People were stunned. Based on the scene of the crime, the police believed she had been caught totally off guard by the attack. Searches were carried out to try and find the murder weapon, but they proved fruitless. But the searches did uncover something interesting. Half a mile away from the house, a plastic bag was found containing jewelry and a camera, 2 items that Joe had said were missing. It was looking less and less like a burglary. Joe was questioned that evening. He said he left for work as normal and headed to the gym beforehand. He was seen on CCTV leaving work at 8:07 a.m. and he said he was going to a bus depot in Broadstone, and his colleague Derek Corney said he would meet him there. Part of Joe's job was checking the advertisements on the side of buses, so he would have to travel around. At 8:45 Derek set off, and when he got to the depot he called Joe to ask him whereabouts he was. Joe said he was in another part of the depot. Derek was questioned and he confirmed he had spoken to Joe on the phone when he got to the depot, and he had been told that he was there, just in a different part of the site. When he first made that statement, Derek was unaware that Rachel had been murdered. When he questioned Joe, Pat asked if there was anyone who was known to not like Rachel, or maybe if she had been seeing someone else romantically. What Joe said left Pat confused. Joe replied, "No, neither of us were having an affair." Pat hadn't asked if Joe was having an affair, so why had he felt the need to clarify he hadn't been? But then the truth came out. Joe had been unfaithful, telling Pat, "It's over now. I don't want anyone to know." He said he had had a brief fling with a woman called Nikki Pelly, and it hadn't been a serious relationship. He had told Rachel 3 times that he hadn't been having an affair. He said that the couple had had an argument the day before she was killed, and he had slept in the spare room. The day after Rachel was found, Nikki was questioned by the police. She confirmed what Joe had said. There had been a relationship, but it wasn't a serious one. The same day, the police received the results of Rachel's postmortem. It revealed that she had been bludgeoned with a heavy object, such as a dumbbell. This was one of the items that Joe had said was missing from the property. Her skull had been fractured in 2 places, and her face, shoulders, and neck had multiple lacerations. Defensive wounds on her arms showed that she had made an attempt to fight off her attacker. It was determined that she had been struck between 6 and 9 times. Blood was also found in her airways, which would have made it very difficult for her to breathe. A couple of days after the murder, a search of Joe's office at work was carried out and his laptop was seized. A series of emails had been deleted, but the police recovered them. Joe had been talking to his sister and about their marriage, in which he revealed his deep hatred for Rachel, using vulgar language and expletives to refer to her, even saying that she repulsed him. When the emails that had been so derogatory about Rachel came to light, Rose said the family was bereft that any person could be spoken about in such an appalling manner. News of the marital problems was a massive shock to Rose too, who said, "He was a loner, he was very strange. I never thought, though, there was anything bad about him. I thought he was a very good husband and a very good father. At family gatherings, he would tend to break off from the adults, and nobody really knew a lot about him." The house was cordoned off for 9 days, giving the scene of crime investigators the chance to thoroughly go through and document everything. Whilst the investigation continued, the family prepared for her burial. They all decided to write letters that were to be put into the coffin with her when she was buried. The family left Joe with the undertaker to say some private words to his wife, and when one of them went back in, Joe said, "You can put the lid on it now," with Jim saying it sounded like he was talking about a tin box, not his wife's coffin. Her parents felt these were very strange and detached comments for an allegedly traumatized widower to make. Her family then gathered for her funeral. Following the burial, her parents received the cards that were attached to the flowers that people had left, and one of them stood out. All Joe's card said was, "See you later, Joe." Joe's behavior had become increasingly strange and unusual. The police had told him he could now go back into the house and he needed to go through everything and make a note of anything he thought had been stolen. He reiterated what he had said. Some of her jewelry, a camera, and 2 towels were gone, as well as one of the dumbbells, but the jewelry and the camera had now been accounted for. He also decided to invite Rose and Jim over, even though the house hadn't been cleaned, and it still had their daughter's blood everywhere. He said that there was a sense of peace and that it would be good for them to visit. Rose didn't want to go back into the house, but Jim said that if it had helped Joe process what had happened, maybe it could help them. To their shock, Joe began reenacting the murder and speculating as to how she had been bludgeoned, even pointing to the blood spatter on the ceiling. He showed them the blood on the walls, adding that he thought maybe the killer had stepped over her body and then cleaned up in the bathroom whilst listening to Rachel as she choked on her own blood, and that the killer had gone back into the room to, quote, "finish her off." When they went back downstairs, Joe was adamant that they listened to the voicemails he had left for her that day. Rose said she could hear Rachel's voice in her head saying, "He did it." Later that night, Rose spoke to Jim about what she was feeling. Jim was distraught and asked her not to talk to anyone else, saying that people reacted to grief in different ways and that Joe was just behaving as if he was in shock because he was so cool and calm. I couldn't speak to Jim about it after that because he would get so upset. But I said I'm not going to say it to you again, but I'm just asking you to be open-minded. Joe also started speaking to the media. He said the family were worried that the killer could possibly strike again, and he went on television to appeal for information. Journalist Jenny Friel interviewed Joe at the house, and before long, he asked her if she wanted to see the bedroom Rachel had been murdered in. She said this took her by surprise, and when he pointed out where the blood had been and where she was found, Jenny said that although she was not squeamish about most things, this made her feel sick. Another journalist, Kieran O'Brien, went to the house 12 days after the murder and took photographs, including one of Joe sitting in his kitchen. Joe said that the police were treating him as a suspect. Kieran asked him if he believed he was a suspect. Joe said yes. Kieran said that he had never had an encounter like that in his whole career. People from within the community and the couple's friendship circles called Joe to offer their condolences and asked if there was anything they could do to help. He would offer to show them the scene of the crime and what he thought had happened, something that was later referred to as the murder tours. On the 22nd of October, Joe appeared alongside Rose as a guest on The Late Late Show with Pat Kenny, the primetime talk show in Ireland. Joe's behavior backstage set alarm bells ringing. Pat Mary spoke to the staff who worked on the show, and they said he didn't appear to be a man who was grieving. He helped himself to food and refreshments and spent most of his time on his phone, whereas Jim and Rose couldn't even look at a cup of tea. Joe's appearance did nothing to stop people's ever-growing suspicions, and what follows is a clip from that episode. The show had offered to put him up in a hotel, but he had said he had to go and meet a client, but this was a lie. He instead went and visited his lover, Nikki. He was on the television to appeal for information about the murder of his wife, and he spent the night with the woman he had been having an affair with. When news of the affair broke in the media, the interest only increased. Journalist Jenny Friel said that, looking back over her notes from the interview with him, he hadn't actually mentioned loving his wife or how much he would miss her. He spoke about how devastated the children were, but nothing about his feelings about it. Despite Joe and Nikki's efforts to play down their relationship, it was becoming clear that this had been a long-term affair over several months. They had met whilst working at the Viacom advertising agency. After going for a night out at a pub, they swapped email addresses and mobile phone numbers to keep in contact. He would tell Rachel he was away for work, and he would instead go and see Nikki. They spoke on the phone every day and would meet each other 2 times a week, all while he vehemently denied any affair to Rachel. 6 weeks after Rachel was murdered, 2 arrests were made. Nikki Pelly was taken into custody for withholding information, and Derek, the colleague who had given Joe his alibi, was also arrested. When Derek was interviewed, he said he couldn't be too sure about the timings, and that they could be off by 40 minutes. Nikki also had a different version of events to the one she had previously given. She admitted that their relationship was far more serious than she had initially said, and that Joe had asked her to play it down to the police. Both were released without charge. The next day, Joe O'Reilly was taken into custody. He refused to answer questions, offering no comment throughout. The police had no murder weapon or forensic evidence. They did have CCTV footage showing a car similar to his in the area at the time, but the number plate could not be made out. As a result, 2 days later, he too was released without charge. The family then asked the police if the letter Joe had put into Rachel's coffin could be looked at, believing he had maybe written something incriminating on it. An exhumation order was granted. March 8, 2005. Rachel's body was exhumed and Joe's letter was removed. It was chemically treated, and using infrared technology they could finally read what he had said. It was 5 pages and included the following passage. Rachel, I love you so very, very much. I cannot think what I will ever do without you, and I don't want to think. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, and you will never be replaced. This is the hardest letter I've ever had to write for reasons only we know. Rachel, please forgive me. 2 words, 1 sentence, but I will say them forever. The note was considered to be ambiguous and not enough to have him arrested again, although for her family this solidified their belief that he was guilty. In December 2005, 14 months after the murder, the police were still trying to build their case. The car that had been spotted on the CCTV footage appeared to be the same make and model as Joe's, a blue Fiat Maria. Despite having the footage enhanced, it still didn't clearly show the license plate. So the officers devised a plan to prove that it was Joe's car on the footage and nobody else's. They searched the database for all other Fiat Maria drivers in the country, and it came back with 2,500 matches. Although they could not eliminate every single driver of that car in Ireland, they were able to rule out enough that it made it far more likely that it was Joe's car. The police also contacted O2 to see if they had any recordings of calls that Joe had made on the day his wife had been murdered. Whilst they couldn't provide that, they did have something interesting. They brought in an engineer from France, and he was able to determine which masts Joe's phone had been close to throughout the day. They were then able to plot his whole route, and the more the police looked into where his phone had been, the more damning it became. At 5:45 that morning, Joe had left to go to the gym located on the outskirts of the city where he was due to meet Derek. He went to the petrol station and filled up his Fiat Maria. Whilst there, he received a call from Nikki. This was the first of 8 calls that day, and they stayed on the phone for 28 minutes, something else he had failed to mention. He went to the gym where he had a shower before heading to work. He sent an email to another colleague, Kieran. He said that his phone would be out of service for the majority of the morning, and he arranged to meet him at 2 p.m. Despite him telling Derek that he was in another part of the depot, analysis of Joe's phone showed he had actually been headed in the direction of his family home. Whilst his phone was out by the house, he didn't make a call or text, but he had got a call from Derek at 9:25 and a text from a different colleague at 9:52. The phone had pinged off of a tower at Murphy's Quarry. This was the nearest mast to the house, and the quarry could even be seen from the property. The car that the police believed was Joe's was caught on CCTV passing the quarry. If Joe was at Broadstone, where he had told police he was, why therefore was his phone pinging off of the Murphy's Quarry mast, less than a mile away from his home? As Joe had made it clear he always had his phone with him, this added to the weight of their case. At 9:59, the car was seen going past the quarry again, driving away from the home. It was only after this that the phone was placed in Broadstone, somewhere he said he had been all morning. At 9 a.m., Rachel had left with the 2 boys to take them to the creche and school, and 3 minutes later CCTV filmed her passing the quarry too. The same camera showed her coming back at 9:41 a.m. It was believed she was murdered shortly after arriving home. When the texts were sent to Rachel asking if she had slept okay, the police checked the corresponding time on the CCTV cameras, and these also picked up a blue Fiat Maria being driven 10 minutes after the text had been sent. They drove the route from where the text had been sent from to the CCTV camera, and it took about 10 minutes. Joe arrived back at the office at roughly 12 o'clock. When he arrived back at work, something stood out to one of his colleagues. She noticed that he appeared to be a bit flushed and red in the face, and it looked as though he had been crying. She asked him if everything was okay, and he said it was. She told him that he looked terrible, and he immediately panicked and sped off towards his office. He stayed there until the call came in that Rachel had failed to pick their son up from the creche. When Nikki had been released without charge, it emerged that she had told a friend it was hard to continue to lie to the police. Nikki told her that Joe had said if he killed Rachel, he could get away with it. She was brought back in for questioning, and she admitted that he had said this, but she said she didn't believe he was being serious. The police later found out that Rachel had told a friend about a huge argument she had had with Joe. She had told him he needed to change his behavior or leave. It also emerged that just 4 months before Rachel had been killed, social services had received an anonymous tip, alleging that Rachel was not fit to be a mother. The claims were absolutely unfounded. Joe and his sister emailed back and forth about the incident with social services, and used various swear words to refer to Rachel and asked how she had got out of this one. Joe replied saying that social services confirmed what he had thought. If they were to divorce, he likely wouldn't get full custody and be able to cut Rachel out of the picture. In March 2006, Derek Corney was brought in by police and questioned. During one of the interviews, due to the stress, Derek actually vomited into a bin in the corner of the room. He then said that the statement he had made previously couldn't have been correct and that the timings could be wrong. Joe was arrested for a second time. Pat Mary was hopeful that they now had enough to charge him, based on all of the phone analysis and how this tied to the CCTV footage, as well as the elimination of the other drivers of the same car. but the director of public prosecutions said they needed more. Pat Mary recalled how Joe had put his thumb up to him when leaving, and how he didn't seem to care at all about the seriousness of the situation or what had happened. On the second anniversary of Rachel's murder, her family held a mass for her. It was held outside Lambayview, but the children did not attend, and neither did Joe. Analysis of mobile phone data revealed more damning evidence. Joe's phone had pinged off of a mast close to the family home when Rachel's murder had taken place, contradicting his statement that he had been at work miles away at a depot. And the more the police looked into where his phone had been, the more damning it became. The evidence was finally enough. October 2006. Police arrived at Joe's mother's house. Pat Mary went into the kitchen, put his hand on Joe's shoulder, and told him he was under arrest for the murder of Rachel. He said, "He turned and faced me. The blood drained from his face and he went white as a sheet. He was not expecting it. He entered a plea of not guilty." June 25, 2007, Joe O'Reilly went on trial. The media and public interest was unprecedented. Queues formed every day as people tried to get into the public gallery to watch the trial. Rachel's family had not seen him in 8 months, so coming face to face with him again at the court was an especially painful experience. Jim said he had a fierce arrogance, and Rose described him as detached. The defense argued that the prosecution had based their case on innuendo, spin, and allegation, and that it was nothing more than circumstantial. But what came out showed that the image Joe had been desperately trying to uphold, that of being a happily married family man, was nothing but a lie. The evidence was strong. The phone analysis, the emails insulting his wife, him lying about where he was, the downplaying of the affair, and his behavior after the fact painted a damning picture. The emails and texts between Nikki and Joe were presented to the court and showed that they had planned to start a life together. The texts that had been exchanged revealed that Joe often told Nikki he loved her, and he would imply that the boys were her children, referring to one of them as "our boy." This was providing a motive for wanting Rachel out of the picture. He had attempted to tarnish her character, calling her a lazy mother who was heavy-handed with the children. It also inadvertently came out that the one who had made the anonymous report to social services containing the allegations that were determined to be utterly unfounded was Joe's own mother. The court was stunned by these revelations. Throughout the trial, Joe kept his head down, looking firmly at the floor, showing no emotion. On the occasions he did look up, it was to talk to his lawyers whilst he laughed and joked. It was put to the court that at 9:45 Rachel had arrived home and Joe, her husband of 13 years and the father of her children, was lying in wait for her in the bedroom. When she went in, he launched his attack, bludgeoning her repeatedly. After beating her, it's thought that he took a shower to wash the blood off before putting his clothes and towels into the washing machine. He then attempted to ransack the place and make it look as though they had been broken into. He then went and put the allegedly stolen items into a bag and dropped them by the stream. When the creche had contacted him to say that Rachel hadn't arrived to pick their son up, Joe stalled and spent more time there than necessary. All of this was to ensure that Rose would be the one to find her daughter's body. The testimony of pathologist Professor Marie Cassidy, the former state pathologist of Ireland, also showed that when Joe had reenacted the murder, including how the killer had likely heard her gurgling and choking on her own blood and then gone back to strike her again, he had been telling the truth. The court also heard from Fiona Slevin. She had testified about a conversation she had had with Joe on the same day Rachel's funeral was held. She said he had told her, "I don't know why they're looking in the fields. The murder weapon is in the water." She added, "It was like he said something he shouldn't have." She told the court he then said, "Well, if I did it, that's where it would be. There's water all around that would get rid of all the DNA." On the 11th day of the trial, the phone triangulation was put to the court. It showed how his phone had been tracked all the way to the vicinity of his house when he said he was at the bus depot on the morning of Rachel's murder. It was a groundbreaking set of evidence. Never before had a murder trial used mobile phone triangulation in this way or to such an extent. And 2 days later, more shocking evidence came to light. The emails were read to the court. On the 14th day of the trial, Nikki Pelly testified. The way Joe had courted the media painted a picture of a cold individual who was desperate to control the narrative. Joe had convinced Rose to go on the Late Late Show, saying it was the police who believed it was a good idea. The opposite was true. Joe had been told to disengage and not talk to the media anymore. One of Rachel's brothers would later say, "He liked that feeling. He enjoyed people's reactions. In my head, it's not human, not normal. But that's the way he is. I honestly believe he is a psychopath." The 21st of July, 2007. The jury returned their verdict. At the Central Criminal Court, Joe O'Reilly was found guilty of murder. He was given a life sentence. Joe O'Reilly attempted to bring his case to the Court of Appeal but was unsuccessful. Following this, he tried to take it to the Supreme Court. This was also refused in November 2016. It was also reported that he had abandoned plans to take his appeal to the European courts. In May 2015, an appeal lodged by Joe to have his conviction declared a miscarriage of justice was refused. He has been refused parole at least 3 times, and Rachel's family will continue to fight to ensure that he remains in prison. In 2012, Joe's brother Derek said that Nikki still loved Joe and was standing by him, believing that he was innocent, as did he. "The Joe I know is not a scumbag," he said. "He is most definitely not a wife beater, and he most definitely isn't a devil. The Joe O'Reilly I know is anything but the ultimate evil. I've never had any reason to doubt him." Nikki Pelly continued to visit him weekly in prison, believing in his innocence. It was reported in 2022 that Joe and Nikki had ended their relationship for a second time, with the first time being in 2017. Sources say they remain close and best friends. More tragedy would hit the Collerly family when in 2010, Rose and Jim's other daughter and passed away at the age of 31 following a battle with cancer, with just 2 weeks between her passing and the anniversary of Rachel's death. Rose described how deeply affected and was by her sister's death. "As soon as our Rachel died, and used to arrive up at the door at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning. She was petrified and she was afraid of him. She never rested. She always thought she could hear noises, someone trying to get in." For those left behind, life after Rachel's murder has been a painful journey to navigate. Rose published a book about her daughter's case titled, Remembering Rachel, the story of Rachel O'Reilly's life and brutal death. She said, "I don't want anyone to ever forget what was done to Rachel in any shape or form. The tragedy of this case is perhaps best summarized by the words of her mother, Rose. I'd love her to be remembered as this bubbly person that we had for such a short time, that touched everybody's hearts. I wish I could go back. I'd give anything to be able to hold her, even just for 1 minute." On November 14, 1986, Jacqueline Lard's ordinary day at her Stafford County real estate office took a sinister turn when she disappeared after work. The following day, a crime scene at her office suggested a violent struggle, and her body was eventually discovered concealed under a carpet in a wooded area miles away. Fast forward to 1989, Amy Baker, an 18-year-old who was visiting her family, vanished on her way home. Her abandoned car was found, sparking a mystery that endured for decades. How were these 2 cases linked, and what breakthrough ultimately led to their resolution in 2024? Amy Baker, a lively individual born on March 16, 1971 in Springfield, Fairfax County, Virginia, brought happiness to her family as the beloved daughter of Mark Baker and Sue Easler. In a significant change of life, the Baker family, which also included Amy's younger brother David, moved from the bustling environment of Falls Church to the peaceful community of Hartwood in Stafford County. This relocation was motivated by her parents, Mark and Sue's desire for a more spacious residence and a piece of serenity away from the urban bustle of Fairfax County. Amy, while adapting to her new surroundings, frequently returned to Falls Church, a place filled with familiar faces and cherished memories to visit friends and family. The Baker household provided a nurturing environment that nurtured Amy's growing interests. She had a passion for field hockey, demonstrating her talents on the varsity team and a love for capturing moments through photography. With aspirations in the arts, Amy set her sights on attending art school in Savannah, Georgia. In the meantime, she found delight in working as an event photographer at the local mall, where she would take pictures of children with seasonal characters like the Easter Bunny and Santa Claus, capturing joyful moments for families. In contrast, information about Jacqueline Lard's early life is less well documented. Born in 1954, Jacqueline was a committed real estate agent in Stafford County by profession, married to Ronald Lard. They shared their lives with their 2 children. Jacqueline Lard, a dedicated professional and loving mother, played important roles both at work and home, although there is limited information about her personal interests and background. On November 14, 1986, Jacqueline went missing in Stafford County, initiating a perplexing and unresolved mystery. She was last seen at around 9 p.m. at Mount Vernon Realty, unaware that it would be her final moment alive. The following morning, her office revealed a disturbing scene, indicating a violent altercation. Stafford County detectives, along with the Virginia State Police Crime Scene Unit and the Federal Bureau of Investigation, meticulously searched the area for clues, including Jacqueline and her missing car. It was only a day later that 2 young individuals playing in a wooded area in Woodbridge made a startling discovery: Jacqueline's body hidden under discarded carpet, confirming her tragic fate. Her abandoned vehicle was later found in Fairfax County on December 18th. Despite not yielding immediate results, the collection of evidence during the investigation would prove crucial in solving her case decades later. Amy Baker's story unfolded in a similarly distressing manner. On March 29, 1989, the 18-year-old's journey to visit her parents abruptly halted on Interstate 95 when her car broke down. Leaving her blue 1970 Volkswagen Beetle behind, she set out for a nearby Exxon station. Throughout the night, Amy's absence from home deeply concerned her mother, Sue Baker. Despite trying to rationalize Amy's delay as an adult decision, Sue sensed a grave outcome as dawn approached. Sue frantically searched for her daughter, making calls to hospitals, towing services, relatives, and the police, only to discover that Amy's vehicle had been abandoned the previous night. The response to Amy's disappearance was mixed, with initial speculation from law enforcement suggesting that she may have chosen to vanish. However, the circumstances surrounding the case raised doubts about the initial theory. Amy's belongings were left behind, and her vehicle was found in an unusual location, contradicting the assumption of a voluntary disappearance. Despite the efforts of law enforcement, who even deployed a helicopter, Amy's family felt compelled to take matters into their own hands. Sue Baker and her sister-in-law, Mary Ballet, armed themselves with homemade missing persons posters and tirelessly searched the area. Their determination to raise awareness about Amy's disappearance was a testament to their resilience in the face of the challenges posed by the pre-digital age. Eventually, their search led them to a heart-wrenching discovery near the Backlick Road Bridge. Amy's body, hidden by foliage, was found just yards away from where she was last seen. This tragic find on Good Friday forever changed the lives of the Baker family. These events, separated by time and circumstances, shared a common thread of unanswered questions and the anguish experienced by families left in a state of uncertainty. The investigation into Jacqueline Lard's untimely death was met with a collaborative effort from various law enforcement agencies at both the state and federal levels. The Stafford County Sheriff's Office, Prince William County Police, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and the Drug Enforcement Administration joined forces to form a formidable task force dedicated to unraveling the mystery surrounding her demise. Despite extracting DNA from collected evidence and conducting exhaustive searches through Virginia and national DNA databases, the identity of the killer remained elusive. Numerous individuals of interest were compared and familial searches were conducted, but no significant leads were found, causing the investigation to reach a standstill and eventually go cold. The discovery of Amy Baker's body marked a crucial turning point in her case. Prompted by the desperate search for Amy, law enforcement officials swiftly secured the scene. The sight of Amy's new tennis shoes, barely worn since her 18th birthday, served as a haunting confirmation of the devastating loss her mother had endured. Despite the swift response that followed the grim discovery, the way Amy's case was handled by authorities left her family feeling disheartened and frustrated. Criticisms were raised about the initial search efforts, which the grieving family deemed inadequate. They mourned the tragic necessity of having to find their loved one themselves, a task they believed should have been completed by the police within the first few days of Amy's disappearance. The autopsy results painted a brutal picture. Amy had been subjected to violence, violation, and strangulation. Her life cut short tragically soon after she left her vehicle. The investigation evolved into a homicide case, leaving the family and community in shock and mourning the profound loss. Following Amy's murder, the police appealed to the public for help, focusing on two suspicious vehicles seen near Amy's abandoned car, an early 80s dark-colored Buick and a blue Ford Escort. Despite the efforts and an influx of tips after the news of Amy's murder broke, a significant call to Crime Stoppers remained a tantalizing lead that never fully materialized into a breakthrough. The caller, believed to possess crucial information, never contacted the authorities again despite their pleas. This unresolved lead, coupled with the urgent plea for the caller to step forward once more, highlighted the challenges and frustrations inherent in the investigation. With no new leads emerging, the case eventually went cold. In the relentless pursuit of justice for Jacqueline Lard and Amy Baker, investigative teams driven by a combination of determination and cutting-edge forensic technology achieved a major breakthrough that led to solving these long-standing cold cases in 2024. Sheriff Decatur of the Stafford County Sheriff's Office, who had been involved in the Lard case since its inception in 1986, ensured that the investigation never went dormant. The dedication to seeking justice for Jacqueline was reflected in the determination of the detectives handling Amy Baker's case, each motivated by an unwavering resolve. Breakthrough in these cases came when retired Detective Dave Wood made the decision to utilize forensic investigative genetic genealogy, combining DNA analysis with genealogical research to shed new light on the identity of the killer. Parabon Nanolabs, a leading company in DNA phenotyping, played a crucial role in this endeavor. Through their advanced analysis, they linked the DNA evidence from Jacqueline Lard's murder scene to that of Amy Baker, conclusively connecting the two cases for the first time. The detectives delved into the circumstances surrounding Amy's tragic demise, discovering that her car had run out of gas and deducing that she may have been seeking help when she encountered her attacker. This vital piece of information added depth to their understanding of her final moments and emphasized the brutality of the encounter. In 2021, the cold case detectives of the Fairfax County Police Department submitted their evidence to DNA Labs International, resulting in the development of a comprehensive DNA profile. Once this profile was uploaded to the Virginia State Database, a direct link to the ongoing investigation of Jacqueline Lard's murder was revealed. This connection between the two cases marked a pivotal moment, propelling the investigation forward with renewed determination. On December 14, 2023, the detectives identified a family name that could potentially be associated with the suspect, leading them on a path that eventually led to Elroy Neal Harrison, a 65-year-old resident of Stafford County. This identification was the culmination of years of meticulous investigation, innovative technological application, and the relentless pursuit of answers by all those involved. Subsequent follow-up on this lead and the acquisition of a search warrant for Harrison's DNA solidified their suspicions. In February of 2024, the Department of Forensic Science confirmed the match based on the DNA collected from Harrison. Consequently, after almost 40 years, the enigma surrounding the deaths of Jacqueline Lard and Amy Baker was ultimately resolved. Elroy Neal Harrison, a name that remained unknown until the groundbreaking resolution of these two enduring cold cases, was born in 1959. Although much of his early life remains mysterious, the available information portrays a man who once resided among the inhabitants of Stafford County, Virginia. However, his life took a significant turn in 1983 when he was apprehended for a bank robbery in Virginia, resulting in his imprisonment. Harrison's time behind bars concluded on June 30, 1986, when he was released back into society. This timeline is crucial as it closely precedes the tragic events involving Jacqueline Lard and Amy Baker. On March 4, 2024, a significant breakthrough occurred in the long-standing cold cases of Jacqueline Lard and Amy Baker, when Elroy Neal Harrison was indicted by a grand jury in Stafford County. The charges against him were severe, including first-degree murder, abduction with the intent to defile, and aggravated malicious wounding of Jacqueline Lard, along with breaking and entering with the intent to commit murder. The following day, On March 5, 2024, law enforcement officers arrested Harrison at his residence in Stafford. At the age of 65, Harrison found himself facing the full force of the law as he was booked into the Rappahannock Regional Jail in Stafford, charged with murder, abduction, assault, and burglary. Held without the possibility of bail, Harrison awaited his arraignment, a pivotal moment in this decades-long saga, scheduled for April 5, 2024. This event marked the commencement of the legal proceedings against him. Throughout the years since the tragic loss of Jacqueline Lard and Amy Baker, their families have embarked on a complex journey of grief and resilience. Edwin Lard, the son of Jacqueline, serves as a prime example of resilience. Despite growing up in the shadow of his mother's unresolved murder, Edwin decided to dedicate his life to serving others. He initially pursued a career as a Navy medical corpsman and later transitioned to becoming a paramedic. However, his commitment to helping others did not end there. Edwin went on to assume the role of executive director at Rescue Task Force, a consulting group specializing in threat protection. As a father to 3 daughters and a son, Edwin stands as a testament to the unwavering spirit of his family. He firmly asserts, "While my mother may have been his victim, I refuse to be his victim. Neither my family nor I will succumb to victimhood." This resolute refusal to let tragedy define them is also mirrored by the Baker family, who have chosen a path of resilience in the face of unimaginable loss. Kimberly Flint was described as an amazing mother and wife who loved life. She enjoyed gardening and was known to have a very positive attitude. However, she began battling depression due to menopause and other health issues. She disappeared at the age of 57 on September 26, 2018 under very strange circumstances from Laneville, Texas. That morning, her husband James left for work at 5:30 a.m. as he normally did. She then spoke to him on the phone at 3:10 p.m. later that day on their landline and asked if he would pick up dinner on the way home from work. She apparently left the house in her black 2016 Jeep Grand Cherokee not long afterwards, leaving her purse, ID, and other belongings behind at the home. About 45 minutes later, her vehicle was found crashed into a cement guardrail on the side of Highway 84 near the Angelina River Bridge 15 miles from their home. But there was no sign of Kim. Accident investigators believe the car was traveling at about 83 miles per hour when it struck a glancing blow on the bridge rail, sustaining damage to the front end and side panels. It continued for about 300 yards until the front tire folded up and the car came to a stop. The airbag was not deployed and there was no blood or other signs of injury. The seat was pulled up where she normally kept it, and her eyeglasses and strangely both sets of car keys were inside the vehicle, which was left in neutral. Due to evidence from the vehicle sensors and the black box, officials do know there was no one in the passenger seat and the driver was not wearing a seatbelt when the accident happened. It was also determined that the gas pedal was pegged out, and at 0.6 seconds prior to the accident, the driver made a 45-degree turn to the right, hitting the bridge at an angle. The brakes were never applied, and it appeared the tire folding under was what ultimately stopped the vehicle, meaning the vehicle intentionally crashed or the driver was unresponsive. However, there was also no evidence of severe injury. Investigators would search the area, but no signs of Kim were found. While her husband went to the site of the accident, their son went to his mother's home to do his own investigating. He noticed that nothing was out of the ordinary and her cell phone was on the arm of a chair. She only used her phone to play games and had never even made a call from it. There was no record of her being at the hospital either. Her husband told police that she rarely drove anywhere and didn't like to leave the house and often asked him to bring home dinner. Her family said it was strange that she was driving because she hadn't felt comfortable driving for the past 2 years. He says that she would have told him if she had plans on leaving home when she spoke to him not long before the incident occurred. 3 search teams, including dogs and ATVs, looked for her for days, including in the river, but she was not located. There was also no clues found in her Jeep. Police are looking into the possibility that Kim was picked up by a stranger after her car accident and met with foul play. One witness recalled seeing a Chevrolet white dually pickup truck at the scene and even went under hypnosis to recall more details. He recalled that there was a clover emblem sticker in the back window of the truck. He also recalled that he saw a possible female squatting down, looking at something on the rear of the vehicle. One theory is that someone with bad intentions showed up at her home and forced her to drive somewhere and she wrecked. There were 2 Amazon packages found on her porch, which adds to the theory that she may have startled box bandits, and they in turn grabbed both sets of keys to the vehicle and forced her to leave. Another theory is that she may have done something to herself, but her family doesn't believe that because she was excited to see her son that was coming home that very day after being gone working for 2 months. However, Kim reportedly had stopped taking her medication for depression, and some speculate that she may have had a mental breakdown. There is also a theory that she was being chased by someone and that's why she was speeding and had the accident and then taken by the person that was chasing her. Her family still has so many questions. Kim has never been found, and as of today, this case remains unsolved. Brittany Danielle McLean was born on November 9, 1987. She was described as optimistic, goofy, and often found the silver lining in things. She was a country girl that loved to be outside and had 6 brothers and 1 sister. She graduated Winesboro High School in 2006, where she played trumpet in the marching band and graduated with honors. She then worked 2 jobs, one at Alto and one at Lowe's Distribution Center, and planned to later attend Baylor University to pursue a career in nursing. On May 4, 2007, 19-year-old Brittany left her job at Lowe's in Mount Vernon, Texas. She had worked the night shift and was headed to her boyfriend, Jeff Stagner's house, located on CR 4837 in the small town of Winesboro, where he lived with his mother, stepfather, and 2 younger siblings. She planned to take a nap before going to her second job, but this was the first time she had done that. Her mother became concerned when she couldn't get through to her daughter on her cell phone. Brittany's sister Hope said that Brittany's mother called so many times that she filled up her voicemail. She then called Brittany's boyfriend around 2:30 p.m. and he told her that he was just getting back home and that Brittany's car was in the driveway. They hung up the phone and Jeff went into the house and found Brittany deceased in his bedroom and called 911. Hours after Brittany arrived, between the hours of 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., she was murdered and sexually assaulted in her boyfriend's bed in broad daylight. Her cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head. Her boyfriend Jeff had allegedly left Brittany asleep in the home alone while he dropped a grandparent off at the airport. He has cooperated with investigators and passed a lie detector test, and the rest of his family had solid alibis. Nothing was stolen from the house and there were no signs of forced entry. The house has since been demolished. Brittany's sister Hope and her brother created a Facebook page called Who Killed Brittany McLean in an effort to bring in tips or information to aid in the investigation. According to reports, a person of interest is Chad Carr. At the time, he was dating Jeff's sister who lived in the home where Brittany was killed. He is an ex-con who has a criminal history of violent and sexual assaults and served 8 years in prison. However, both Jeff and Chad remain persons of interest. For many years, Jeff has consistently posted violent and morbid things on social media involving jokes of murder and so forth. No one has been arrested for Brittany's murder, and as of today, this case remains unsolved. On September 21, 1987, a sheriff's deputy from Isle of Wight County discovered David Nobling's Ford Ranger pickup truck abandoned at the Ragged Island Wildlife Refuge during a nighttime patrol. The truck was found with closed but unlocked doors, the driver's side window down and the radio still playing, yet there was no sign of anyone inside. 2 days later, the bodies of Nobling and Robin Edwards, aged 20 and 14 respectively, were discovered by a beachcomber on the shoreline of Ragged Island, approximately a mile away from the James River Bridge. Both victims had been shot at close range in the back of their heads. State Police spokeswoman Corinne Geller stated that the case remained unsolved for 36 years. During the investigation, Wilmer was among the several suspects considered by the investigators. However, it was only after Wilmer's death in 2017 that a genetic sample could be obtained and compared to the DNA preserved from the crime scene. At a press conference held on January 8th at the State Police's regional headquarters in Suffolk, Geller announced that the Virginia Department of Forensic Science had issued a certificate of analysis confirming a genetic match to Alan Wilmer Sr. The DNA sample obtained from Wilmer's body also matched the DNA of the perpetrator responsible for the rape and murder of Teresa Spahowell, a 29-year-old woman who was found dead in 1989 in Hampton. According to Captain Rebecca Warren of the Hampton Police, Howell was last seen alive on July 1, 1989, at 2:30 a.m. at the former Zodiac Club, a popular night spot off Mercury Boulevard. Approximately 8 hours later, construction workers discovered female clothing near the woods off Butler Farm Road, leading them to the unidentified remains of a woman. After Howell's family filed a missing person report in York County, the police identified the remains as Howell's and determined that she had been strangled to death. 3 days later, articles of Robin's clothing were also found near the crime scene at Ragged Island, inside Nobling's truck. In a 2022 interview with the Smithfield Times, prior to the 35th anniversary of the unsolved crime, Jeanette Edwards Santiago, Robin's older sister, shared additional similarities. At the time, Santiago was 19 years old and living independently when her parents called her on September 19, 1987, a Saturday, inquiring if she had seen Robin that evening. Santiago responded negatively, stating, she explained, "I didn't think much of it then because she had run away a couple of months earlier and was gone for 2 weeks." Santiago mentioned that Robin and she had not been on speaking terms since she had reported her sister for riding her bicycle from their parents' house in Newport News all the way to the Coleman Memorial Bridge in York County. According to Santiago's mother, Robin had arranged a date with Jason Nobling's cousin on September 19th, which turned out to be the last time anyone saw David or Robin alive. Jason, David, and Michael, David's brother, arrived at the Edwards residence in David's Ford Ranger to take Robin to a movie that was sold out. Instead, the group went to an arcade and dropped Robin off at her parents' house around 10 p.m. After returning home, Robin put her younger sister Pam to bed, but later went out again with David. The reason why they ended up crossing the James River Bridge to Ragged Island and whether they did so willingly remains unknown. During the press conference, the police did not provide further details on how or if Wilmer knew his victims. "For 36 years, our families have lived in uncertainty," stated representatives from the Nobling and Edwards families in a joint statement. "We have lived with the fear that the person responsible for deliberately killing Robin and David could harm another victim. Now, we can find solace and justice in knowing that he can no longer harm anyone else. We are not claiming that these cases are closed. They are resolved for now, but we acknowledge that there is still much work to be done," expressed Geller. The subsequent task, she mentioned, is to attempt and construct a chronological sequence of events in Wilmer's life in order to determine if there were any additional victims. Alan Wilmer, who was 63 years old at the time of his death in Lancaster in 2017, worked as a commercial fisherman when the Ragged Island murders took place. He possessed and frequently resided on a 1976 fishing boat called the Denny Wade, which he would dock at marinas in Gloucester and Middlesex counties as well as throughout Hampton Roads. He was known to drive various trucks, including a distinct 1966 blue Dodge Fargo pickup with the custom license plate EM Raw, which may have been a reference to his primary occupation of farming clams and oysters. According to Geller, Wilmer was also commonly referred to as Pokey. In addition to his fishing endeavors, he operated a tree service and was an enthusiastic hunter. Geller chose not to provide further details on how and when the police began to suspect Wilmer of either crime. Part of the cold case philosophy is to thoroughly review and re-examine all witness statements and evidence, which is a time-consuming and intricate process, but ultimately very effective, Geller explained. Due to the absence of any felonies on Wilmer's criminal record, the police did not have his DNA on file and were unable to obtain a sample for testing until after his death in 2017. Wilmer, Geller stated, was one of several suspects whose recently acquired DNA was submitted for analysis. In a written statement distributed during the press conference, Wilmer's family expressed their complete and horrifying shock upon learning of the DNA match. "The man who committed these crimes was not someone we knew," the family statement conveyed. "The revelation of his actions has deeply affected our family as we grapple with reconciling who we believed him to be with the unimaginable things he has done. We mourn deeply for the families of the victims and the community, and they are in our prayers. We cannot fathom the extent of their suffering throughout all these years. Please inform us if you were acquainted with Wilmer," the nature of your relationship with him, and any interactions you had, so that we can establish a timeline and determine if there are other potential victims. Geller emphasized to the general public. Former Isle of Wight County Sheriff Charlie Phelps, who took over the Ragged Island case when he assumed office in January 1988, revealed to the Times in 2022 that he had long suspected another individual, Samuel Reeder, whom the new DNA evidence now seems to exonerate. Shortly after beginning his term as sheriff, Phelps was investigating the reported theft of firearms from a woman's home in Isle of Wight and grew suspicious of the woman's son. The son eventually confessed to stealing a gun from his mother's residence and selling it at a pawn shop in Mississippi, but then implicated a roommate, Reeder, who had lived with them in Isle of Wight. According to the book, A Special Kind of Evil, The Colonial Parkway Serial Killings by Blaine Pardo and Victoria Hester, Reeder, then 28 years old, had provided one of the original tips to the sheriff's office during the investigation into David's and Robin's disappearance. Phelps recalled that Reeder initially claimed to have visited Ragged Island out of curiosity on September 23, 1987, when the bodies were discovered, but later stated that he had seen Nobling's truck parked there days earlier. In his final account, Reeder admitted to taking money from Nobling's wallet, which was left in the truck, but denied any involvement in the deaths of David and Robin. A 2022 report on the unsolved Ragged Island case revealed that Reeder was found dead in his Chesapeake mobile home on the morning of August 8, 1990, at the age of 31, hanging from a doorknob with an electrical cord around his neck. Jupiter is the northernmost town in Palm Beach County, Florida. Picture perfect with gorgeous sandy beaches, amazing wildlife and scenery, and big, beautiful homes along the coastline, occupied by many of famous name. In 2020, it was also home to 51-year-old Gretchen Anthony. Gretchen had moved to Florida in 2006, but before this had spent a lot of time in the busy New York City, where she had attended fashion school. She later moved back to her hometown in New Jersey, getting another degree before starting work as a teacher. As soon as she came to Florida, she said she knew it was for her. The sun, the beaches, the community. It was perfect, and she settled right in. She soon moved into a career as a human resources director, calling her colleagues her second family. Friends said she was so outgoing and confident, a real chatterbox, and her job meeting new people every day was perfect for her. She also had a 12-year-old daughter, Ava, who lived between both her and her ex-husband, Jeff. A big part of Gretchen's life was about staying active and working out. Another reason she loved where she lived was that she was able to paddleboard and work out on the beach. After her divorce and career change, she threw herself into fitness even more. She started looking for a personal trainer to push her, and it was here that she met David Anthony. Co-workers said David had a big presence both in personality and stature, standing at 6'7". He was very charming, popular, and a really good laugh. Clients called him the hot trainer, and the gym's owner Tabitha said people really warmed to him. Gretchen and David shared so much in common, especially of course their love of staying active. But most importantly for Gretchen, he got along brilliantly with Ava. Gretchen and David soon married in Las Vegas in March of 2015, but the happiness was not to last. When in late 2019, after a string of issues that Gretchen said they simply couldn't work through, they had separated and divorce papers were filed in February 2020. David moved in with his mother and Gretchen was now by herself as Ava was staying with Jeff for a while. If this wasn't all stressful enough, more anxiety would soon follow. March 2020, a month and year many will remember forever. The COVID-19 pandemic saw just about everything come to a grinding halt, and the fear of the unknown was lingering over everyone. As the lockdowns had just come into effect, Gretchen, like many, was on social media more than ever. She was still working but was now virtually catching up with friends and family, asking for TV show and film recommendations and seeing how everyone else was filling their days up. She was often reposting and commenting on everything from inspirational quotes to memes and jokes. On March 19th, just a few days into everything shutting down, Gretchen reposted a picture which said, "The following day she popped into work and everyone said she was in good spirits. She had plans the next day to catch up with a friend and all seemed to be as well as it could be considering the circumstances. But on March 21st, everyone was met with silence. There was nothing on her social media and she had failed to clock in to her shift. A few friends then got some concerning text from Gretchen. She said she had an acute case of COVID-19 and wasn't doing so well. Dawn, Gretchen's boss and her close friend, heard she was sick and sent her a message. She heard nothing back. Dawn texted her on Monday morning, March 23rd. "Gretchen, are you okay?" At the end of the day, when she still hadn't heard anything back, she texted again. "Hi, please let me know if you need something. I'm really worried about you." She got her reply and it was far more serious than Dawn thought. The message said she had gone to Jupiter Medical Center where she passed out with a fever of 102 degrees and low oxygen levels. "So I'm at a CDC coronavirus treatment facility that only handles COVID cases. The good news is my blood type has potential to be used in the cure. Not sure if you remember me saying that I have a strain of mad cow disease in my blood. Well, that strain is significant in gathering more answers to find a cure. For safety purposes, Dr. Sinclair and her team are strongly recommending that we maintain contact with immediate family members only. I'm using my mom. She said she was being transferred to Belle Glade, over an hour away from Central Florida. Her friends were concerned but also confident that Gretchen was fit and healthy and would be able to fight it off." Gretchen's ex-husband Jeff and Ava had also both received some text messages. These said that she may even have to be placed in a medically induced coma, making her impossible to get hold of. The texts to her daughter were cold and distant, and Jeff said the minute he read these, he knew something was wrong. The messages were full of spelling mistakes, abbreviations she wouldn't use, and bad punctuation, and this just wasn't how she talked. The messages were now coming in thick and fast, saying many different things, but all indicating she was in a very bad way. Some friends were fearing it was a life or death situation, but others thought the same as Jeff. Something was off. More concerning still, her phone had stopped sharing her location with her daughter, something she had never done. After this, with the concern mounting and so many mixed messages about where she was and what was happening, the police were called to do a welfare check. There was no answer at the door. Jeff decided to go to the Jupiter Medical Center himself, and to his surprise, he did find Gretchen's Mini Cooper parked outside, with her purse on the front seat in full view of the passersby. Again, something that didn't make sense. He called in and asked about Gretchen's status, and the response confirmed his fears. Gretchen wasn't there and they had no record of her on the system, nothing since 2008. On the 26th of March, 2020, a missing persons report was filed and Detective Jared Kennison was in charge. Based off of everything he had heard, he had big concerns. He got a warrant to enter her home and it seemed to indicate a struggle of some sort had taken place. There was a broken picture frame and shards of glass on Gretchen's bed, 2 bottles of cleaning products next to a cloth on her kitchen countertop, and inside the washing machine were more towels that had a red substance on them. These were taken away for testing. Police also found small drops of what looked like blood on the wall in the master bedroom. When police went into the garage, they found the door was locked and the key was broken off inside the lock. They noticed that the ground was wet, and there appeared to be large bleach stains on the floor, leading outside to the driveway. They said the smell of cleaning products was overwhelming. A cadaver dog was brought in and detected the smell of blood inside her residence. Gretchen had had cameras installed in her home a while back, so these were seized and they hoped that something would have been picked up. Some of them had been ripped out of the wall. Despite this, they were confident that the footage could be recovered from the cloud. As they were inspecting the house, a neighbor came running out with more information for them. She said that on the 21st of March, roughly between 6 and 6:30 a.m., she heard a woman's voice let out what she called a blood-curdling scream. It sounded like it was coming more from the garage area than inside the house, and the screaming had lasted for about 15 minutes. Another neighbor said that on the 23rd of March, they heard someone cleaning inside Gretchen's garage, which was closed up. Was water mixed with an unknown chemical coming out from under the door and into the alley. That same witness said she saw a small black Nissan truck running in Gretchen's driveway with a tarp covering the back. No one was inside it, but it was definitely out of place. The only person everyone knew to drive a vehicle like that was her ex-husband David. Jeff, who had been going over and over the text messages from Gretchen's phone and comparing them to other people's texts, suddenly realized exactly who the words reminded him of, and it too was David Anthony. Police called her now a strange ex-husband, and he also said that Gretchen told him she was in isolation and he was just as worried about her. Then David said something else that was strange. He told them that in the weeks before, Gretchen had said she was fearing for her life, and after coming out of isolation, she might be running away. She had discovered that there was a tax fraud going on in her workplace, and after she contacted the IRS, she was now fearing the repercussions. Definitely a story that no one else had heard. A quick search showed that David had a criminal record, having been arrested for holding up a Blockbuster store with, unbeknownst to them, a fake gun. He was also charged with assaulting a police officer. They needed to find David and talk to him in person. He wasn't working anymore, having been fired a few weeks beforehand, but he wasn't at his mother's home as they expected. Susan answered the door and was happy to help. She showed officers that she had got the same sort of texts that everyone else had been getting from Gretchen, but she had no idea where her son was, and it was possible he was far away. He had packed up his truck on the 24th of March, and he, along with his dog, Kobe, had left without a word. The CCTV footage from outside the hospital was back, and although it was grainy and dark, it showed a very tall person dropping Gretchen's car off in the early morning hours of the 24th of March. It was definitely not her, and they could only see one person around. David was 6 feet 7 inches, and now they knew what Jeff thought of the texts. As well as David packing up and setting off without warning, it wasn't looking good. On March 25th at around midday, another break came when they could see Gretchen's phone ringing near Pensacola. This was around 600 miles away from Jupiter. If she really was isolating at the CDC Coronavirus Treatment Center as her texts had claimed, she would have no reason to be so far away. They wondered if it was possible that Gretchen was in David's vehicle too, either voluntarily or against her will. One witness then told police she had had a conversation with David on the 25th of March via text. When she asked if he had heard from Gretchen, he said, "Ran into her randomly, Sat AM. She mentioned something about going to the beach to ground herself because she wasn't feeling well. Then she proceeded to tell me I should plead insanity on some bogus police charges I've been dealing with." The police needed to delve further into David's past and his prior relationships. David Anthony had moved about a lot as a child and lived with just his mother in Palm Beach Gardens. Friends said the outgoing and loud personality that everyone saw in the gym was not always there. When he was younger, he was very quiet, speaking only if someone addressed him directly. He had very low self-esteem and told people it came from being overweight, as well as being the tallest child in the class, and he was badly bullied too. He wasn't allowed to join the school sports teams and fell into a depression. His family believed he was bipolar and wanted to take him to be assessed and get some medication, but he didn't want to and threw himself into losing weight and getting physically stronger. Inspired by athletes and basketball players like Kobe Bryant, he changed it all. He made such a transformation that after high school, he earned a scholarship to play basketball. As soon as he was done, he moved into personal training, which suited him well. In 2010, he dated a woman called Heidi for about a year. They met when he offered her a free personal training session. Heidi was 10 years his junior, and although being worried they might not have that much in common, said he was everything she was looking for in a partner. His behavior soon shifted and he started fixating on really small things. He would time how long she took to do something, keeping tabs on what she ate and whether she worked out or not. In November 2010, Heidi walked into her apartment to find David standing there. He grabbed her hand and got down on one knee. Heidi tried to contain her excitement, but what followed was not a proposal. David said he needed to surround himself with successful people that took their health and fitness seriously. Heidi was mortified. A few years later, David would meet Gretchen in the same way. For the first few years of their marriage, Gretchen and David appeared very happy, complimenting each other well. But to a lot of people's shock, Gretchen said she had actually spent 3 years trying to leave him, but always coming back to try and make it work. She told her friends that David was becoming manic and would verbally lash out. Gretchen said the good times were great, but the bad times were awful, and she had really been holding on to all the great memories and hoping it would stay that way. The couple even separated for about 6 months, but came back together to give things another go. But his manic episodes seemed to worsen, and by 2018, things reached a scary point for Gretchen. One day, David shot up saying that the world was ending and he needed to go. He loaded up his truck with bags of rice, pots and pans, and 10 pairs of shoes before speeding off, only to return a while later unfazed. Gretchen could see how bad it was getting, but she didn't know how to help him. She described the look in his eyes as crazy, and would often lock herself in rooms to get away from him and his outbursts. She texted a friend and said, "I wish him well and hope he learns how to deal with his mental issues. I feel bad that I couldn't help, but I think he needs to learn how to love himself before he can love anyone, something he might not experience in this lifetime." She installed cameras around the house to keep an eye on him, but also to protect herself a little. She sent her boss Dawn a message saying, "I'm watching him on the cameras and waiting for him to go to bed. Then I'll go downstairs and get a knife to put into my pillow, just in case, and hopefully get some sleep." On Christmas Eve 2019, Gretchen went through David's backpack and found her wedding ring, her passport, her driver's license, and her credit cards. After this, she said there was no turning back, and decided to end the relationship for good. David moved out of the house and into his mother Susan's, and Gretchen had the locks changed and added more cameras. He carried on personal training, but his coworkers noticed that he was now arriving late and seemed very quiet. David had been previously fired twice for aggressive behavior and was only allowed his job back after persuading the owner Tabitha that he was working on his mental well-being and getting therapy. Tabitha said there's no in-between with him. You never know what David you're going to get. Nevertheless, she was happy to give him a second chance. David's behavior became even more erratic when his idol, Kobe Bryant, along with his daughter, Gianna, and 7 others tragically passed away in a helicopter crash in January 2020. Tabitha said you would have thought he and Kobe Bryant were best friends. He was traumatized by it. David would start hysterically crying in front of the fitness classes he was running and have to leave to compose himself. On February 24, 2020, Tabitha had to let him go for good after he failed to turn up at all. Leaving clients stood outside the gym. He lost it and started screaming at her. And 4 days after this, Gretchen officially filed the divorce paperwork. Gretchen and David had been separated a while and were now seeing other people. David had even tried to ask Heidi back out, which of course she bluntly said no to. All his dates were ending in disaster, and he even tried to move all his stuff into one woman's house without her knowing or being there. David would turn up at the home that he and Gretchen used to share. He would stand outside shouting about the world ending and moving to Costa Rica. It also came to light that 7 days before Gretchen had gone missing, David was placed under arrest. He was found in a mall in New Mexico after he was seen approaching teenage girls, sweating profusely and acting oddly. When officers got to him, he was nervous and erratic, before getting aggressive. All the while, his dog Kobe sat calmly in the vehicle. David suddenly lunged into his truck, slamming the door on one of the officers' arms. It took 3 officers to bring him to the ground. As authorities started searching David's truck, they found a large knife under the seat, lots of cash, and his passport. They also saw that David's license plate was covered by black electrical tape. David blamed Gretchen's 12-year-old daughter, saying that she must have put it there. He was charged with resisting arrest with violence, but soon posted his $3,000 bail and left. And just days later, Gretchen was missing without a trace. Police still had no idea where either of them were. David was still on the run and would turn his phone on and off periodically, which gave them a small lead to follow. But ultimately, he was just doing this to try and lure police to random places. A Be on the Lookout, otherwise known as a BOLO, was put out for his vehicle, and a call came in from a store saying that someone matching his description had been in to try and sell some women's jewelry. The store clerk handed over the CCTV, which showed David mumbling and saying something about either his mother or his stepmother dying from COVID-19, and that the jewelry had belonged to them. The employee paid David with a check, which he later cashed. Over the next few hours, he went from business to business trying to sell what he could. On the 27th of March, his phone indicated he was now in the Texas area, and the following day it showed he was back in New Mexico. Officers there were now on the hunt for him too. To their surprise, David then called the detectives himself. He maintained that Gretchen was not in any danger and was most definitely alive. He said that she had prepared a statement that she wanted him to read. In this alleged statement, it reiterated the idea that she had found fraudulent activity at work and was fearing for her life. Undeterred and not believing a word he said, Detective Kennison and his team continued on with their search, and finally David Anthony was tracked down. To their disappointment, they got word that they still didn't have enough to arrest him, and he was let go again. They were able to seize his vehicle, however, and inside they found 2 Amazon Echoes, some security cameras which had clearly been ripped out, and Gretchen's smashed phone. Her cadaver dog immediately alerted officers to the truck, the same way they had reacted in Gretchen's home. The footage was also finally back from Gretchen's house, and one camera outside showed a very tall man standing in the porch area at around 6 a.m. on the 21st of March. He very carefully maneuvers around the camera, holding something, but it is not clear what. 10 minutes later, Gretchen could be seen walking into her porch too, and she let out a yell. There was more muffled audio that was picked up by her Alexa. She had been trying to shout to get the lights turned on and attempting to make a call to 911 using it. Unfortunately, her device was not specifically programmed to do this, and no call to police was ever made. Gretchen was then pulled into the garage, which showed the moment she was killed, footage which, understandably, has never been released. The man then turns around and, exactly as they all thought, it was David. He then proceeds to pull the camera off the wall. On March 30th, a warrant was finally issued for his arrest. A day later, David was in handcuffs and in custody, charged with kidnapping and second-degree murder and awaiting extradition. Kobe was taken to a shelter and later adopted by a new family. Infuriatingly, David was still saying the same things and told Kennison that Gretchen was still alive almost 40 times across the whole interview. Kennison was losing his patience with him and his obscene lies. He knew David and Ava were close and decided to try and use this relationship to get him to talk. Detective Kennison even asked Ava to record a message for him personally. "David, it's Ava. I love you. I'm scared. I miss Mom. I need to know where my mom is. Please do the right thing and tell me where my mom is. Please. I love you." But still, David said nothing. Losing steam, they decided to leave him alone for a while to mull everything over. For the next several months, David remained quiet, and police were worried that they might never find Gretchen and bring her home to her family. A grand jury soon indicted him, and he was now facing a first-degree murder charge as opposed to a second-degree one. If found guilty at trial, he could be facing the death penalty, but David had something that they didn't. The knowledge about where Gretchen was and what had actually happened, and a conviction without a body would be challenging despite all the evidence. The prosecution offered him a deal. David finally decided to talk. For days before Christmas, everyone gathered in the courtroom as David's team announced he was going to enter a plea. David Anthony pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and kidnapping, and as part of this, he told them where Gretchen was. According to his plea agreement, prosecutors could not withdraw the plea or seek any additional charges based on what investigators were to find when they recovered her body. Gretchen Anthony was finally found wrapped in a blanket, 3 miles from her house in some woods behind a Walmart. They concluded that she had died of stab wounds to her neck and stomach area. David Anthony was sentenced to 38 years in prison, but few believed his words. One of Gretchen's friends said, "I called BS on that. It's appalling. Absolutely appalling." Police and prosecutors say they can never be sure why David killed her, but they wondered if he had been trying to convince Gretchen to flee with him, and when she said no, he felt he had no choice but to kill her. However, this is all speculative. He is scheduled to be released from prison in 2058. He will be 81 years old. Friends and family say that Gretchen was the most beautiful person inside and out, and you couldn't wish for a more devoted or loyal friend in your corner. All Gretchen wanted to do was move on with her life and focus on her biggest achievement and best friend, her daughter Ava. Her biggest joy in life was her daughter. She loved Ava with every ounce of her being, her sister said. Ava now lives with her father Jeff and Gretchen's mother, and is said to be doing as well as possible given the circumstances. It is a case that leaves more questions than answers, and one that saw authorities travel over 6 states seeking the truth about what had happened to Gretchen Anthony. David had tried to cover his tracks using the confusion and fear caused by the pandemic. But due to the tenacity of those investigating, Gretchen and her loved ones were finally able to get some justice and lay her to rest. Gretchen's friend said, "I think that's the hardest question to ask. Why? And sometimes you just need to believe that there are higher powers in place that have a plan." In the early hours of a quiet October night in 1984, a promising young student's life was tragically cut short within the confines of her own apartment. This incident sparked a perplexing enigma that would linger over Dallas, Texas for years to come. Picture a simple act of kindness where opening your door to a stranger in need unknowingly becomes the pivotal moment that determines your destiny. Little did anyone know that the key to unraveling a heinous crime lay concealed, patiently awaiting the opportune moment. Angela Samota, affectionately known as Angie, was born on September 19, 1964 in Alhambra, California. She was an intelligent and ambitious student at Southern Methodist University, whose life mirrored the vibrant social scene of 1980s Dallas that she cherished. Angie stood out not only for her academic pursuits in the challenging fields of computer science and electrical engineering, but also for her active involvement in the Zeta Tau Alpha sorority, where she held the position of social chair. Despite still being a junior, Angie displayed her independent spirit by residing in her own apartment, which she diligently paid for herself. As the youngest of 5 siblings, she was renowned for her warm, cheerful, and genuine nature, effortlessly brightening every room with her radiant smile. Angie's appeal extended beyond her academic achievements. Her beauty and effervescent personality made her a beloved figure on campus. Juggling her active participation in sorority activities, a demanding double major, and a part-time job, she showcased an extraordinary level of determination and vitality. However, hidden beneath the surface of academic accomplishments and college festivities, a malevolent scheme was unraveling, leading to a fatal encounter with an unknown assailant. Who had ill intentions towards Angie, and what was their motive? On the night of October 12, 1984, everything seemed ordinary as Angela Samota, a 20-year-old, spent her Friday evening at the State Fair of Texas alongside her friends Russell Buchanan and Anita Kadala. Angie's boyfriend, Ben McCall, a construction supervisor with early morning work commitments, regrettably couldn't join them. The fair was merely a prelude to their plans for the night at the exclusive Rio Room Dance Club. At the club, Angie, renowned for her sociable and vivacious nature, thrived in her element, effortlessly mingling and captivating those around her with her infectious energy and radiant smile. Little did anyone know that this night would mark her untimely demise. As the night progressed, dropped off Buchanan near his apartment in Lower Greenville, followed by Kadala. Initially, Kadala had intended to spend the night at Angie's condo, but changed her mind due to Angie's early morning football game plans. Before heading home, Angie made a quick stop at her boyfriend, Ben McCall's residence. It was a routine farewell, a simple "see you later." However, unbeknownst to them, the wheels of fate had already been set in motion. Angela returned to her condo on Asbury Drive alone. It was approximately 1:45 a.m. when McCall received a distressing phone call from Angie. Her voice trembled with unease as she mentioned an unfamiliar man who had appeared at her door, requesting to use her phone and bathroom, a seemingly innocent plea. Was it truly as harmless as it seemed? The call abruptly ended with Angie assuring McCall that she would call back, but that call never came. Instead, an eerie silence hung in the air. Worried, Ben attempted to reach her again, but there was no response. Overwhelmed by concern, he hurried to Angie's apartment only to find the door locked and no answer to his persistent knocks. Panic consumed him, left with no other choice. He utilized his early generation mobile phone, an essential tool for his construction profession, to contact the authorities. The events that happened that night unfolded into a perplexing enigma. The local authorities arrived promptly after 2 a.m. and were met with a chilling scene behind the closed door of the apartment, one that would haunt the city of Dallas for years to come. For rookie officer Janice Crowther and her partner, who were already exhausted from a grueling 12-hour shift managing crowds for a major sporting event, the night had been exceptionally long. As they arrived at the scene, Crowther couldn't help but notice Angie's Toyota Supra parked outside, casting an eerie stillness over the apartment. A sense of unease washed over her as she sought out the apartment manager for access. "I was trembling with fear," Crowther recalled. "I could sense it. Something was amiss. It was an almost surreal night. What awaited them inside was a sight of pure horror." Crowther's partner ventured into the bedroom and discovered Angie's lifeless body lying on the bed, devoid of clothing, her skin stained with blood. Her wide-open, brilliant blue eyes seemed to convey the terror she had endured. The investigators began to piece together the fragments of this macabre puzzle. There were no signs of forced entry. Did Angie know her attacker? The subsequent autopsy report revealed a savage assault. Angie had been sexually assaulted and brutally stabbed 18 times, with numerous wounds piercing her lungs and heart, ultimately leading to her untimely demise. Traces of blood in the adjacent bathroom indicated an attempt to clean up after the heinous act. A lone shoe was discovered in the living area, while Angie's other shoe and clothing lay strewn on the floor beside her bed. Question lingered. Who could have perpetrated such a savage crime, and what could have been the motive? As dawn broke over Dallas, the sun's rays failed to dispel the darkness that had descended upon the city. A killer was on the loose, and the community trembled in fear. Little did they know, this was merely the inception of a mystery that would take decades to unravel. The Dallas Police Department faced an arduous task. A brutal crime had been committed, and the race against time to apprehend the culprit had begun. Angela Samota's lifeless body spoke volumes to the seasoned eyes of the investigators. Who could have had such motive? Who could have had the opportunity? The initial focus was on those closest to Angie. Ben McCall, her boyfriend, was the last person to hear her voice. However, as they dug deeper, the pieces of the puzzle didn't quite fit together. Ben had a solid alibi supported by the timeline of events. The attention quickly shifted to others in Angie's circle. This included an ex-boyfriend, a friend with a history of violence, and Russell Buchanan, a 23-year-old architect who was known to have deeper feelings for her. The net of suspicion was cast wide. In a twist of fate, early DNA analysis provided a momentary breakthrough. The blood type found at the scene didn't match Ben's or the ex-boyfriend's, but it matched Buchanan's blood type. This cast a shadow of doubt over him. In a time when DNA technology was still in its early stages, polygraph tests were relied upon. Buchanan underwent the scrutiny of the machine and passed. However, the case remained unresolved. Despite the suspicions, the police lacked sufficient evidence to charge Buchanan, who eventually left the country for graduate school. As time passed, the trail grew cold. The community lived in fear, the family endured unspeakable grief, and a killer roamed the streets of Dallas. But this was not the end of the story. Angela's memory continued to burn brightly in the hearts of those who loved her, igniting a flame that would one day reveal the shocking truth. Despite the passage of time, the files of Angie's case remained stored in the archives of the Dallas Police Department. The evidence collected, the interviews conducted, and the DNA samples taken all awaited a breakthrough. In the world of criminal investigations, time can be both a blessing and a curse. While memories fade and leads grow cold, technological advancements open new doors that were once closed. The late 80s and 90s witnessed significant progress in DNA technology. Techniques that were once groundbreaking became routine, and databases of DNA profiles began to form, offering renewed hope in solving cold cases. However, as the 1990s transitioned into the new millennium, Angie's case remained unresolved. It would require more than just the passage of time and advancements in science to solve this case. It would demand the unwavering determination and perseverance of someone unwilling to let Angie's story conclude as an unsolved cold case. In every narrative marked by tragedy and injustice, there occasionally emerges an individual of resolute determination. For Angela Samota, that individual was Sheila Wysocki, her former college roommate and close friend. Sheila, a psychology major, was the antithesis of Angie. She grappled with dyslexia, faced academic challenges, and was introverted and reserved. Despite their disparities, the two forged a deep friendship. Both grew up without fathers, which likely contributed to their strong bond. Following the tragedy, left Southern Methodist University, unable to come to terms with the harsh reality of her friend's murder. She eventually moved on, marrying Charles and raising 2 sons in Tennessee. However, the specter of the past lingered. Tormented by Angie's unsolved murder, Sheila's life took an unexpected turn. Her evolution from a grieving friend to a resolute private investigator was nothing short of remarkable. Years after Angie's passing, far removed from the realm of criminal investigation, found herself at a crossroads. Memories of Angie and the persistent need for closure spurred her into action. Fueled by a pledge made to Angie before her demise, a vow to always watch over each other, Sheila embarked on a journey that would alter her life irrevocably. What does it entail to solve a decades-old cold case? For Sheila, it necessitated a complete reinvention of herself. She became a licensed private investigator. Her objective was to bring Angie's perpetrator to justice, an arduous undertaking even for seasoned detectives. Nevertheless, Sheila's determination never faltered. She persistently reached out to the Dallas Police Department more than 700 times, imploring them to revisit Angie's case. Driven by a profound sense of loyalty and justice, her relentless efforts finally yielded results. In 2006, Sheila's unwavering determination led to the reopening of the case. The advancements in DNA technology presented new possibilities to explore. The previously collected DNA samples became the crucial key to unraveling the enigma surrounding Angie's murder. However, the question remained, who would the DNA implicate? Could it truly be that, after all these years, the solution to Angie's murder lay within the very evidence gathered from the start? Sheila Wysocki's unwavering commitment to preserving her friend's memory altered the course of events. Nevertheless, the journey was far from over. The path to justice is often convoluted and lengthy, and this case was no exception. The year 2008 marked a pivotal turning point in the Angela Samota case. After 24 years, a breakthrough was on the horizon, one that would stem from the very heart of modern forensic science, DNA analysis. Assigned to the case, Detective Linda Crum reevaluated the DNA evidence using the latest technology. The samples collected decades ago were now poised to divulge their secrets. Contacting Sheila Wysocki, the detective uttered the words, "We have him." Sheila assumed she was referring to Russell Buchanan, but fate took an unexpected twist. The DNA found at the crime scene matched a name in the National Criminal Database. Donald Andrew Best Jr., born on September 1, 1948 in Jefferson County, Arkansas, a convicted criminal already serving a life sentence for sexual assault. In 1985, Bess had been sentenced in Harris County, Texas to life imprisonment for 2 counts of aggravated sexual assault and 1 count of aggravated kidnapping. He adamantly refused to cooperate with female police officers, resorting to derogatory terms when addressing women. The revelation was nothing short of shocking. Bess, during the time of Angie's murder, had been on parole while serving a 25-year sentence for sexual assault. He was a stranger to her, transient predator whose path tragically intersected with Angie's. Equipped with this newfound evidence, the authorities acted swiftly. Bess faced capital murder charges for the sexual assault and murder of Angela Samota. The trial, which took place in 2010, marked the culmination of a long and arduous journey for justice, filled with pain and hope. Inside the courtroom, emotions ran high as evidence was presented, testimonies unfolded. Notably, Bess's ex-wife and several other women bravely took the stand, recounting his history of violence and sexual assault. Shockingly, even his own ex-wife testified that he had abused their child during their marriage. During the trial, Bess, who was already in poor health at 61 years old, suffered a heart attack, causing a 3-day delay. His defense team argued that the presence of his DNA at the crime scene did not definitively prove his guilt in the murder of Samota. They even suggested the possibility of consensual relations between Angie and the convicted criminal, insinuating that her choice of clothing that night indicated her comfort. In the closing arguments, the defense attorney raised a thought-provoking question, questioning whether the discovery of semen alone should automatically brand someone as a murderer. However, despite their efforts, the overwhelming evidence presented during the trial led the jury to unanimously find Donald Bess guilty, ultimately sentencing him to death. Prosecutor Pat Curlin expressed relief for Angie's loved ones, stating that she did not have to endure the pain inflicted by Bess any longer. However, the wheels of justice turned slowly for Bess. His appeals prolonged his stay on death row for several years until his death in October 2022, caused by a heart attack while awaiting execution. While the verdict brought a sense of closure for Angie's family and friends, the pain of their loss remained. Furthermore, the conclusion of the trial did not mark the end of discussions and analysis surrounding the case. The lead investigator on the case shared his belief that Samoda's attacker was already inside the apartment when her boyfriend, Ben McCall, knocked on the door, potentially triggering the fatal attack. According to the prosecutor, it is believed that when McCall knocked on the door, she made an attempt to get up or call for help. Additionally, the prosecutor is of the opinion that the suspect swiftly cleaned up and left the apartment while McCall was searching the neighborhood for Samoda. For Sheila, solving Angie's murder marked only the beginning of her journey. She initially planned to retire once Samoda's case was resolved. However, everything took a different turn when she started receiving letters from individuals desperately seeking answers regarding their own unsolved cases. This compelled her to continue her work as a private investigator. Sheila took on more than 100 cold cases and successfully solved at least 53 of them, providing closure to numerous families. The combination of advanced forensic technology and Sheila's unwavering determination to uncover the truth against all odds brought an end to one of Dallas' most perplexing mysteries. The resolution of this case prompted the Dallas Police Department to recognize the importance of allocating resources to cold cases. Angela's case ultimately transformed the approach of law enforcement towards unsolved crimes. Brandy Ellen Wells was born on November 28, 1982, grew up in Tyler, Texas, and attended Chapel Hill High School. She loved to read and enjoyed music, but was described as naive and not street smart. She often went by the nickname Blinky as she had a habit of frequently blinking her eyes. While in college, she married a man, quit school, and then moved to Dallas, Texas. However, they would divorce after a couple years. In 2006, at the age of 23, Brandy lived with a roommate in Brownsboro, Texas. She planned to re-enroll to Trinity Valley Community College and planned to become an elementary teacher. On August 3, 2006, she planned to go to a pawn shop to get some money, but instead ended up going to the now-closed nightclub called Graham Central Station in Longview, Texas. Before arriving at the nightclub, she stopped by a local bowling alley where her mother's friend works as a bartender. She had a drink on her mother's tab and told the bartender where she was going, but the bartender tried to discourage her from going there. Despite having little to no money and low on gas, she strangely drove to the Graham Central Station Club, which was 45 minutes away. Her mother had assumed she had gone to the Electric Cowboy, which was much closer. She had asked her mom for gas money prior to going, but she didn't have any to give her. Brandy was unfamiliar with the area where the club was located and had to call them several times to ask for directions, and allegedly arrived after 10:30 p.m. alone. By the time she got there, her car was almost out of gas and she asked other customers for help, but it is unclear whether anyone offered to help her. Brandy was seen entering and exiting the club shortly after midnight and was not reportedly intoxicated at the time. The next morning, her black 2000 Pontiac Grand Prix was found parked on the shoulder westbound on I-20 just outside of Longview and was 300 yards west of FM 2087. Her purse and wallet were still inside and there was no sign of a struggle, but the driver's seat was reportedly pushed all the way back, but Brandy was only 4'11". There was a plastic gas can in the car, which her loved ones don't believe belonged to her. There was also a napkin with a man's name and phone number written on it. When detectives contacted the man, he said that he had met her at the club the night she went missing and offered her a drink. She declined and he gave her his name and number. He also recalled hearing her telling people that she was low on gas. In regards to the video surveillance of the nightclub, there was confusion over who could be Brandy, which resulted in a video of the wrong woman being put on the news. It would be 6 weeks before the mistake was corrected. Brandy did leave the nightclub in front of a tall man in a cowboy hat. At first, she goes in a different direction than him, but then she appears to veer and go to the left. He turns his head as if saying something to her, but it's unclear if he called her over to him or if she realized she was walking the wrong way to her car and that's why she veered left. It would take several days for the car to be linked to Brandy, who was reported missing by her mother. No fingerprints were found in the vehicle, but inside was an old cell phone of her ex-boyfriend's that he had left behind while serving in Iraq, which was no longer functional. Police unknowingly investigated the phone believing that it was her own cell phone, but actually her phone was missing along with her. Turns out, there was some activity on her cell phone after she disappeared. Over a week after she went missing, there were many outgoing calls from her phone because 3 people had found it and were using it. All 3 individuals took a polygraph test, but one of the men failed it. The man has not been publicly identified, and though he has been interviewed multiple times by police, he has not been called a suspect in her case. He claims he found the phone on the side of the road. Over 3 years after her disappearance, her mother Ellen says a man named Tim called her claiming Brandy was alive and living in Kansas City, Missouri. The caller hung up before Ellen could get any more information, and it is believed to be a false lead. Within 2 years of her disappearance, an unknown woman filled out a job application using Brandy's social security number in Raleigh, North Carolina. The address put on the application was to an apartment of a man that just returned from active duty in the military and never heard of Brandy. It is unknown who the woman was and if she has any connection to Brandy's disappearance. Brandy remains missing and her family is desperate for answers, and as of today this case remains unsolved. Ora Denise Johnson was born March 26, 1981, and went by the nickname Niece. At the age of 5, she lived with her family in the 300 block of Boulder Street in Big Sandy, Texas. On April 2, 1986, her father stated he last checked on her between 1 and 2:30 a.m., and at that time she was still in bed asleep. When her parents woke up around 6:30, she was gone along with her orange bedspread. The back door to the mobile home was found open, but there were no signs of forced entry into the home and no one heard anything unusual that night. Investigators would use tracker dogs to look for her, but unfortunately, no indications of Niecy's scent were found near her home. Investigators also searched nearby abandoned wells and dragged nearby stock pines. Officers on horseback searched the banks of the Sabine River, which was located just a few miles away from her residence. However, despite all efforts by local police, on- and off-duty deputies, firefighters, and others, no trace of Niece was ever found. All signs pointed towards her not being in the area, and investigators have always believed the person responsible knew the girl's family and their habits. Authorities announced they considered David Elliott Pinton a person of interest in Niece's disappearance. He has been incarcerated in an Ohio prison since 1987 and has been convicted of 5 child murders, including his own 2-month-old son, 3 Dallas area girls abducted in the 1980s, and 9-year-old Nidra Ross in Ohio. David was a family friend to Nidra, and he was known to smoke crack and do other illegal narcotics with her family members. He would eventually sign a plea agreement admitting to the death of the 3 girls in Dallas, Texas. David is a former soldier whose reign of terror began when he killed his 2-month-old baby, Michael James Pinton, in November of 1984. He fled while free on bond and became a fugitive traveling across the country. He is also a person of interest in the disappearances and murders of several other girls, and police believe he may have killed as many as 20 children. However, some speculate that he isn't Niece's killer because it doesn't fit his MO, as he was an opportunistic who lured girls into his car and was not known to enter homes at night. Pinton's cellmates went to investigators and claimed he had implicated himself in the disappearances of Niece and 2 of the other girls. However, he has not been charged in connection with any of these disappearances. He also allegedly told his cellmate that he abducted and killed at least 50 children but has adamantly denied it over the years to authorities. He has repeatedly declined interviews in prison, but he did agree at least once. He spoke of problems with drugs and the solicitation of young prostitutes in Korea while in the U.S. Army. He said he only signed the plea agreement admitting to killing the 3 Dallas girls so that he wouldn't be put on death row. He did admit to killing his friend's 9-year-old niece in Columbus, Ohio. Tragically, just 9 months before Niece's abduction, on July 2, 1985, her parents lost their 6-year-old son, Corey Johnson, to an accidental drowning in Galveston, Texas. Her mother and father divorced sometime after her disappearance. Niece has never been found, and as of today, this case remains unsolved. Raina Reason, who had recently broken up with her boyfriend, Matt Elser, was looking forward to go on a date with him after the close of work. They wanted to sort out their differences and see if they could become a couple again. Unfortunately, the date never happened because, at around 6 p.m. on the 26th of March, 1993, a car arrived for Raina Reason, and that was the last time she was ever seen alive. The question of what happened to Raina Reason bugged her family and the police for decades before answers were eventually provided 21 years later. Today's murder case takes us to LaPorte, Indiana, a small community about 70 miles southeast of Chicago and is the county seat of LaPorte County. LaPorte, which is a French name for the door, is a typical small Midwestern town with plenty of cafes and bars, trees, and small shops. It is not regarded as a place where you would expect an awful crime to occur, but in 1993, a crime that shook the whole community occurred. Raina Reason was born on May 6, 1976 to Ben and Karen Reason in LaPorte County, Indiana. In the spring of 1993, Raina Reason, who attended the LaPorte High School, was an average high school sophomore who had also played different instrument in the school band. According to her school records, she always had good grades. She was an honor student who worked 3 jobs. Raina Reason had strong aspirations of becoming a veterinarian. Her love for pet even made her take up a job at an animal hospital. The 16-year-old seemed to have her life figured out. On Friday, March 26, 1993 appeared to have been a normal working day for Raina Reason as she head out at around 4 to work at Pine Lake Animal Hospital. After work, she had arranged a date with Matt Elser, her longtime boyfriend, with whom she had recently broken up. They planned on getting back together and hoped the date would be of help. At the close of work, Matt Elser, who was also a sophomore at LaPorte High School, made his way to Raina Reason's workplace in order to pick her up, but, to his surprise, she was nowhere to be found. Rather, the animal hospital looked deserted as the lights were off and the doors closed. He drove by the hospital a couple of times, but he still couldn't find her or her car. Thinking she must have stopped by her house to grab a few things, Matt Elser drove to her house. On getting to Raina's house, her father, Ben, told him Raina hadn't returned home from work either. They decided to wait for her return, but around 10:30 p.m., when she still didn't come back home, they knew something was wrong and they feared the worst. Raina's parents and her younger sister, Wendy, decided to go to the station to report her missing. When they got there, they were told to wait for 24 hours to file a missing person report. Ben tried to reason with the police, telling them it was unlike Rionette to leave home for so long, but there was nothing the police could do until the 24 hours threshold was completed. By the next day, a search was launched for her. Her family called people they knew, including Lori, her oldest sister, to ask if they had seen her, but nobody seemed to know where and what had happened to Rionette Reason. The Reason's family put up flyers around their community, and the police made a public appeal for information that could lead to Raina's whereabouts. A lead was generated when witnesses reported that they saw Raina Reason talking with 2 men in a sedan outside of the animal hospital. They said she appeared to be arguing and quarreling with one of them. To the witnesses, it seemed like a lover's fight. The police assumed that Matt Elser was likely one of those men since they had recently broken up. They then interviewed him and discovered that he was not involved in the disappearance of Raina Reason. Also, Raina's parents, who had approved of Matt Elser's relationship with their daughter, believed he had nothing to do with her disappearance. After a continuous search, by the next evening, Raina Reason's car was found with the hood up on County Road 200 East, just 9 miles from the animal hospital where she worked. At first, it looked like she may have had trouble with the car on the side of the road, but it was later discovered that the keys were in the ignition and the car started without any problems. The investigators believed that the car was staged to look like a breakdown. On searching the car, they discovered Raina Reason's purse and a man's ring. The investigators thought the ring could bring answers and wanted to know who it belonged to. Matt Elser was then questioned about the ring. He said it wasn't his, but it belonged to Jason Tibbs, Raina Reeson's ex-boyfriend. Jason Tibbs and Raina Reeson dated each other for 6 months while they were in the 7th grade. They broke up, and soon after, Raina started dating Matt Elser. The police interviewed Jason Tibbs, and he admitted the ring belonged to him. When asked how it got into the car, he claimed to have been doing some work on Raina's car and had taken off the ring, placed it in the car, and then forgotten about it. They further asked him what he had been doing the night Raina Reeson went missing. He claimed he and some of his friends were fox hunting. Fox hunting is a game of hide and seek that uses cars. The people hiding would give clues to their location over the CB radio, and the seeker had to find them based on those clues. Police spoke with his friends and they confirmed they were playing the game, but no one actually admitted to seeing Jason Tibbs during the game. Jason Tibbs' alibi, though not strong enough, was enough at that time to let him off the hook. The search for Raina Reeson continued. Days turned to weeks and weeks into a month. Eventually, 1 month after her disappearance, on April 26 of 1993, a father and his teenage daughter were fishing in a rural pond, just off Range Road, north of US 20 in LaPorte County. They discovered a fully clothed dead body with 2 logs across its back. The man immediately called the police, and when they arrived, they noticed that the dead body was wearing clothes similar to what Raina was wearing when she disappeared. The body was later confirmed to be the remains of Raina Reeson. The coroner ruled Reeson's death as a homicide, and the medical examiner determined the cause of her death to be asphyxiation, which means Raina Reeson was choked and deprived of oxygen. Before her remains were discovered, the police had suspected few persons that could have had a hand in her disappearance. Ray McCarty was one of these few suspects. He was married to Lori, Raina's oldest sister, and been a suspect in the initial phase of investigation, but had claimed he never saw her. Lack of sufficient evidence had made the police let him go. However, after she was found, the detective then got a tip saying Ray McCarty should be interviewed thoroughly, and this is because Ray McCarty had once been convicted of child molestation when he continually raped Raina Reeson at the age 11 and got her pregnant at the age of 14. Raina Reeson had an abortion while Ray McCarty received a 3-year suspended sentence in 1991. His probation ended on the 5th of January 1993, just 2 months before Raina's disappearance and eventual murder. The police thought he might have truly had something to do with Raina's death, since he probably was pissed at her for ratting him out for what he had done to her. A witness had also come forward to say they had seen Ray McCarthy at the animal hospital where Raina recently worked. This made the police to call in Ray McCarthy for another round of interview, and this time, he admitted to having seen Raina the evening she disappeared. He explained to the police that around 5:40 p.m. on March 26, 1993, he was looking for a house for sale on Warren Street, just around the block from the animal hospital. Ray McCarty said he could see the animal hospital and Raina's car in the parking lot from the house where he was. So he went to the animal hospital, where he found Raina sweeping or mopping in the foyer. He asked her if she knew where Lori was, and she replied that she did not, and he left. When the police asked him why he had lied initially about seeing Raina, he told them that he had picked up a female hitchhiker that night and didn't want Lori to know. He said Lori was still untrustworthy of him after he sexually molested her sister. Ray McCarty was considered a person of interest in the case, but there was no evidence linking him to the crime, and without any other leads, the case went cold for a while. A year and a half later, Indiana police pulled over a van driven by a man named Larry Hall. They arrested him for attempted kidnapping. The police discovered newspaper clippings of Raina and a prescription bottle with the name R. Reeson on it in his van. After his arrest, Larry Hall claimed to have kidnapped and killed Raina Reeson. However, after investigating his claim, the police discovered he was in Kentucky when Raina Reeson disappeared, and the prescription bottle was fake. Though Larry Hall was ruled out as a suspect in this case, he was later sentenced to life imprisonment for an unrelated murder. In 1998, the investigators working on the Raina Reeson's case decided to take another look at the men in Raina's life. Matt Elser's story was the same. It never changed, and the authorities believed he did not murder Raina. Detectives looked at Jason Tibbs' alibi of fox hunting. They concluded it was not solid enough because people playing the game were in their own vehicles and never admitted to seeing Tibbs. They also looked at Ray McCarty's profile and somehow got a search warrant to search his property. Investigators then found blood in his car and 2 handguns and a stun gun in his home. They arrested Ray and charged him right away with murder in May 1998, but while he was in jail, LaPorte County elected a new prosecutor, Robert Beckman, who decided there was not enough evidence against Ray McCarty to go to trial. Investigators were never able to determine where the blood in his car came from. Ray McCarty was said to be a hunter, so it was possible the blood in his car was an animal's blood. The charges against Ray McCarty was dropped in August 1999, and the case once again became a cold case. In March of 2008, 9 years later, the case was reopened when Ricky Hammonds, who was 14 years old at the time of Raina's disappearance and murder, contacted the police to say that he had information regarding Raina Reeson's case. Ricky Hammonds, who was in prison for murder, told police that he had witnessed Jason Tibbs and another man named Eric Freeman pull his sister's car into their family pole barn. Eric Freeman was said to have been dating Ricky Hammond's sister at the time and had moved in with them to be with her. When Jason Tibbs and Eric Freeman opened the trunk, Ricky had seen a body inside, covered with a blanket and with the face exposed. At the time, he said he did not realize it was Raina Reeson until after he watched about her disappearance and death on the news. When asked why he never said anything before, Ricky Hammonds told the police that he did not come forward in 1993 because he had been smoking marijuana in the barn at that time and did not want to get into trouble. Detectives then called Eric Freeman at his home in South Carolina, asking him questions about Raina Reeson's murder. Eric Freeman dodged every question because he did not want to be charged as an accomplice. However, in 2013, he was called again by the police. This time, he testified after the police offered him immunity from the law in exchange for his honesty and cooperation in Raina Reeson's murder case. He then told the police that he and Jason Tibbs had drove to the animal hospital around 6 p.m. as Raina was leaving work. Raina Reeson and Jason Tibbs then got into a car driven by Eric Freeman. Tibbs, who knew Raina and Matt Elser had issues with their relationship, convinced Raina not to get back together with Matt but him. Raina did not like the idea of dating Jason Tibbs again. When the car pulled over on the side of the road, Raina and Jason Tibbs got out of the car, and they both got into an argument until Jason hit Raina, knocking her to the ground. He then choked her to death. Eric Freeman and Jason Tibbs then put her body into the trunk of the car. They later backed the car into a pole barn belonging to the Hammonds family. Unknowingly to them, Ricky Hammonds was hiding there and had seen everything that transpired. While at the pole barn, Eric Freeman, who was pissed and scared, asked Jason Tibbs why he had killed Raina, and Tibbs' response was, "If I can't have her, nobody can." Then, Eric Freeman helped Jason Tibbs dispose of Raina's body in a pond along Range Road where she was found. In August of 2013, police arrested Jason Tibbs and charged him with the murder of Raina Reeson. On Friday, 23rd of August 2013, he was arraigned in court. According to court documents, Jason Tibbs has always been a person of interest early in the investigation after his ring was found in Raina Reeson's car. There were also letters from Jason to Raina, taken from her bedroom, that said he would go to almost any extreme to be her boyfriend again. The prosector further read aloud 2 love letters Jason Tibbs had written to Raina Reeson in their 7th grade. Both letters professed his love for her and expressed disappointment that they were not together. One of the letter read, "It kind of bothers me to see you tied down to one person. I'm jealous of math." Jason Tibbs' trial began in October 2014 and ended a month later. All through the trial, the defense tried discrediting Ricky Hammonds and Eric Freeman testimonies. They focused their attention on Ray McCarty as the killer of Raina Reeson, and this is because, at one point, Ray McCarty had threatened to kill Raina Reeson if she reported their sexual relationship. However, the defense's theory was not believed by the jury. Jason Tibbs was found guilty of murder, and in December 2014, he was sentenced to 40 years in prison. A year later, his attorney, Scott King, appealed the murder conviction, but the Indiana Supreme Court voted against it. Following his arrest, Raina's father, Ben Reeson, said in an interview, "When you murder somebody, you don't murder that person. You murder a whole family." Though her killer has been brought to justice, but Raina's death seemed not to have brought closure to her family yet. In his words, Ben Reeson said, "You take it a day at a time, you learn to live with it. You won't get over it, so you learn to live with it." He also expressed his hope of finding a semblance of peace. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.